I've always believed the Las Vegas Raiders players were still somewhat committed to the season, until today, when I watched the tape and realized something troubling. This team seems to be aware of its situation, and honestly, it looks like they've mentally checked out. Yesterday's performance was a real eye-opener. I could see the lack of effort from several players, and their body language said it all. Asterisk, I don't want to be here anymore, asterisk. It's clear that some of these guys are no longer invested. What makes this even more concerning is that the heat is on head coach Antonio Pierce. It's crazy how quickly things have shifted. Just earlier today, two separate reporters asked him if he felt his job was safe. The first question was about whether he's done enough to secure his position for next season, and Antonio's response was quick and blunt. I'm under contract. No acknowledgement of the team's struggles or the challenges they faced, just that he's under contract. It's a telling response. Another reporter asked if he had spoken with Mark Davis, the Raiders' owner, about the state of the team. Antonio Pierce mentioned that he talks to Davis regularly, even after the team's loss yesterday. According to him, everything with Mark Davis is positive. But let's be real, Pierce should be fully aware that his job is in jeopardy. I'll admit, 8 weeks ago, I was one of the people advocating for Pierce to stay and help bring some stability. But now, it just doesn't make sense to keep him around any longer. Here's the thing. Did Antonio Pierce actually deserve the head coach position in the first place? Sure, he gave a passionate speech after the team's meeting when Josh McDaniels was fired and the players rallied behind him. That was great for a moment. But the reality is, the Raiders are 2-12 this season, and the season has been effectively over for weeks now. It's hard to justify keeping a coach who hasn't shown he's capable of turning things around. Antonio Pierce hasn't proven himself as a strong play caller. Whether on offense or defense, he hasn't shown that he can make the right decisions in key moments. And in the NFL, that's a big issue. A team needs a head coach who can make an impact, especially with the strategies and play calling. It's also worth noting that some of the Raiders' assistant coaches could be in line for head coaching opportunities in the future. Defensive coordinator Patrick Graham could be one of them. If you're the Raiders, you need to look at all options for improvement, especially with some talented coaches available. Now, when it comes to potential replacements, everyone is talking about Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. He's gotten a lot of attention for helping turn the Lions into one of the top offenses in the NFL, and he's definitely a rising star in coaching. But let's be real, Ben Johnson isn't going to take the Raiders' job. The Raiders aren't an attractive option for a coach like him right now, especially when you consider the state of the roster and the uncertain future at quarterback. If Johnson does leave Detroit, he'll have better opportunities elsewhere, possibly with teams that have more stability and a clearer path to success. If the Raiders want a fresh start, they need to think long-term. They'll need a coach who can develop talent, especially at quarterback, and work with the pieces they already have. The time to seriously consider moving on from Antonio Pierce is now, before this team sinks even further. The reality is, the Raiders are probably not going to land the #1 overall pick. While there's still a chance, the Giants might end up with the worst record due to their lower strength of schedule if both teams lose out. So we'll see how it plays out, but regardless, the Raiders do have some real coaching candidates to consider for the future. Let's focus on a few of the names that make sense, starting with offensive coordinators, because I believe that's the smartest direction for the Raiders to go in. One name that stands out is Joe Brady, the current offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills. Brady has a solid track record and could be a great fit for Las Vegas. He made a name for himself as the offensive coordinator at LSU, where he helped Joe Burrow lead the Tigers to a national championship in 2019. Burrow went on to have an incredible Heisman-winning season and then became the star quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals. Many people questioned whether Burrow's success was a one-off, but Brady's coaching proved he could elevate quarterbacks to new heights. After his time at LSU, Brady went to the Carolina Panthers, but his stint there didn't go as planned. The Panthers struggled, and he didn't have much time to make an impact before head coach Matt Rule was fired. Some people started doubting Brady's abilities, but he bounced back when he joined the Buffalo Bills. In Buffalo, he's played a key role in helping Josh Allen become a potential MVP candidate this season. His work with Allen is impressive, and you can see how Brady has helped unlock Allen's full potential. This shows that Joe Brady has the talent to lead an offense, and he could be a great candidate for the Raiders. What makes him even more appealing is that he's still somewhat under the radar. If the Raiders act quickly, they might be able to hire him before he becomes one of the most sought-after names in coaching. If Brady stays with Buffalo for another couple of years and continues to work with Allen, he'll become the next Ben Johnson, one of the top candidates for head coaching jobs across the league. But of course, there's always the risk that he might not work out. That's the gamble with hiring any up-and-coming coach, but it's a chance the Raiders could take if they're looking for fresh energy and creativity. Another coach I think the Raiders should consider is Cliff Kingsbury. Yes, I know the Raiders already tried to bring him in once before, but he's proven that he can make things work. Kingsbury had a tough run as the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, but let's be honest, his struggles were more about the team's dysfunction than his coaching ability. Kyler Murray's inconsistency and the Cardinals' poor drafting didn't help, and it's hard to evaluate a coach when the roster is in disarray. Kingsbury has since made a name for himself with the Washington Commanders, and I think he deserves another shot as a head coach. Then there's Zach Robinson, the offensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons. While he might not be a candidate this year, he's someone to keep an eye on in the future. Robinson is running a solid offense with the Falcons, and once they make the move away from quarterback Kirk Cousins, he could be ready to step up as a head coach. If the Raiders want to go the offensive coordinator route, there are several strong options out there, including Robinson, Kingsbury, and Brady. But the big name on everyone's mind right now is Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. Johnson has turned Detroit's offense into one of the most explosive in the league, and he's becoming the hottest name in coaching circles. While he'd be an amazing hire for the Raiders, there's a catch. Johnson will likely have his pick of teams when the time comes. The Bears, for example, are in a great position to hire him, especially with the progress they've made since 2021. If Johnson is serious about leaving the Lions, it'll probably be for a team with a more solid foundation than the Raiders right now. The bottom line is, there are some solid candidates for the Raiders, but they need to act wisely. If they want to move forward with a new coach, they need to find someone who can bring a fresh perspective and turn this team around, especially on offense. Whether it's Joe Brady, Cliff Kingsbury, or someone else, the Raiders have options, and they need to choose carefully. The chance of the Raiders bringing in Ben Johnson is slim, but there are other coaching candidates worth considering. One name that I still like, even though his team hasn't had the best season, is Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator for the Houston Texans. Slowick is definitely someone to watch for a head coaching job in the near future, whether that's this cycle or next. He's a talented offensive mind who knows how to design successful systems. This year, the Texans' offense hasn't been as explosive as it was last season, but a lot of that has to do with the natural regression many second-year quarterbacks experience. C.J. Stroud, while still playing well, has shown some typical signs of growing pains. It's important to remember that every quarterback goes through this phase. Patrick Mahomes, for example, had some struggles early on too. Despite this, the Texans are still winning football games, and that's what really matters. At the end of the day, it's about finding ways to win, even when things aren't clicking perfectly. Slowick has helped his team keep the ship afloat, and that's a big part of what you want in a head coach. Another coach who deserves some attention is Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. While I'm not personally a huge fan of his, Moore has done enough to earn some recognition. He's been getting some buzz recently, but there's still some uncertainty about whether he's truly ready for a head coaching role. Then there's also guys like Kay Kubak from the New Orleans Saints, but I think he might still be too young and unproven. At this point, the Raiders need someone who's a little more established, someone who can step in and lead without too much uncertainty. When it comes to defensive-minded head coaches, there are some strong candidates too. One name that stands out is Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Chargers. Minter has a strong track record, especially from his time coaching at Michigan, where he played a big role in turning their defense into one of the best in the country. People were even saying at the start of the season that Minter could revolutionize NFL defenses. The Chargers have shown improvement under his leadership, but I'm still not completely sold on him as a head coach. It's a bit like Mike McDaniel, who came from a defensive background and ended up making a name for himself with the Dolphins. The jury's still out on Minter, but he's someone to keep an eye on. Another potential candidate is Mike Vrabel, the head coach of the Tennessee Titans. Vrabel has had success with the Titans for several years, including multiple playoff appearances. He's proven he can build strong defenses and has earned the respect of his players. Unlike Antonio Pierce, Vrabel has already shown he can be a successful head coach. However, the challenge with hiring a defensive-minded coach like Vrabel is that you'll always need to bring in a top-tier offensive coordinator. That's a consideration the Raiders would need to weigh carefully. There are other names that might come up, like Bill Belichick, but he's likely headed to the University of North Carolina, and Brian Flores is another possibility. Flores has a complicated history. His time as head coach of the Miami Dolphins didn't go as planned. largely due to his failure to navigate the political side of being a head coach. However, he's since learned from those mistakes and could still be a great coach. He runs one of the best defensive schemes in the NFL, similar to Patrick Graham's, but with more emphasis on blitzing. The Raiders could do worse than considering Flores, especially if they want to bring in a defensive-minded head coach with the potential to turn the team around. The Raiders have real options when it comes to hiring a new coach, but they'll need to carefully assess each candidate. Whether it's an offensive guru like Bobby Slowick or a proven defensive leader like Mike Vrabel or Brian Flores, the team needs to find someone who can bring both leadership and success to the organization. The Raiders are at a crossroads, and they really need to figure out which direction they want to go. They could stick with Antonio Pierce, or they could take a look around the NFL at potential candidates, including offensive coordinators, to see if there's a fit. But hiring just any coordinator isn't a guaranteed solution. Alternatively, the Raiders could go after the best available offensive coordinator and make him the head coach right away. There are two different approaches here, and both come with their pros and cons. If the Raiders decide to hire a defensive-minded head coach like Brian Flores or Mike Vrabel, finding the right offensive coordinator to pair with them becomes the next challenge. It's not as easy as it sounds, and it might take time to find a proven candidate who can turn the offense around. There are also college coaches out there who might consider making the jump to the NFL. But with the changing landscape in college football, especially with the NIL, name, image, and likeness deals, many of them might choose to stay in college for the time being. As for the current Raiders team, it's clear that things have taken a turn for the worse. The season is all but over, and it's evident that the players are no longer fully invested. The body language on the field tells you everything you need to know. There's a lack of energy and focus. Take Christian Wilkins, for example. He was supposed to be out for about 4 weeks, but now isn't playing at all. There's been no real update on his injury, but it's clear that he's not coming back anytime soon. Players are banged up, and it's clear that the motivation to push through the rest of the season is gone. This is a tough reality to face, but it's time for the Raiders to seriously consider moving on from Antonio Pierce. As much as I supported giving him a chance earlier in the season, it's become clear that the team needs more. Someone with a proven track record, especially in terms of offense. If they decide to hire a defensive-minded head coach, that's fine, but they need to find the right offensive coordinator to pair with them, and that's no easy task. Additionally, the Raiders will also need to develop a quarterback for the future, whether that's Cam Ward, Shedder Sanders, or someone else like Jalen Daniels or Dylan Gabriel in the second round of the draft. The bottom line is that the Raiders can't afford to stand still. They need to make bold decisions and think about long-term development, especially when it comes to finding a new coach and a new quarterback to lead this team forward. Let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video.